Welcome, everyone. I am your host, Lindsay Briggs, and this is Start Now by Syracuse University. If you're interested in how trailblazing entrepreneurs got their start during their college years, then stick around. We can't wait to share this innovator's insight on how to run a successful business. Let's get started. And today we'll be talking to Sandy Khaund, who is a serial entrepreneur with 25 years of experience across software development and product marketing, business development, and strategy consulting. He has worked in manager roles and on many boards in Fortune 500 companies, including Intel, Microsoft, and Warner Media, and so much more. Blockchain with Live Nation and Ticketmaster. And so, without further ado, welcome Sandy Khaund. Thank you so much for being on the Start Now show series.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Glad to be here. Really excited.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's just, dive right into it. You have a plethora of experience in software. I feel like you're just the merger of technology and media, right? Where did it start for you? Like, where does this passion of founding a business with technology and media, where did that all start for you?
Sure. And so I'm based in the West Coast, but I grew up in the Northeast, so not too far from Syracuse. I grew up in New Jersey, exit 8 for all you Jersey people. By the way, that joke never lands in California, but when I do it on the East Coast, people, at least Jersey people, appreciate that. If you want to know really where it began, it was in the fourth grade, and I started a company called Egbert Vision. It's a long story where that name came from, and it's always the little stories that you have when you're 9 years old. But I had a computer now that no one probably on this call would know about, except if Sean Brannigan's out there listening, but a Commodore VIC-20. And it was a computer with, I kid you not, 8 kilobytes of RAM. And I would write programs on it, and I would sell it to my classmates for $0.25 a piece. It almost sounds like I'm making it up, but this is what I love to do. And for me, because I wasn't a very artistic guy, my drawing doesn't go much beyond stick figures. I'm not very musical. If you hear me in karaoke, you might want to turn the other way. You might want to get out. But when it came to what I could do with my fingers and what I could do with a computer to put code on a screen, I could write games, I could write puzzles, I could write all these other things. And when people would look over my shoulder and say, wow, that's cool, I'd be like, give me $0.25 and I'll put it on your computer, right? And it's funny that spirit that takes you when you're 9 years old, which, by the way, it's not like it stayed. My brother wanted to be a doctor when he was like 5 years old, and he is a doctor now. And it was this constant throughout. But even when I was in college, I wasn't 100% sure about like I see like my talents and I see that I want to start a business. I'm going to bring those together. What I did think was like, okay, I see my talents. God, I really don't want to work for anybody because that kind of stinks. Like, what do I do? And it's literally like the solution staring me there in the face. But frankly, I wasn't, one of the better things about today and being a student today is like, I think we're all very aware about entrepreneurial opportunities for students. We have the stories of a Bill Gates and a Mark Zuckerberg and even Larry Page and Sergey Brin came out of college, right? Some of the most important companies in the world were founded on college campuses, but those stories weren't as obvious when I was in school back in the early 90s, when it's like, oh yeah, there's a couple of them out there, but just go. And for me, I wasn't like raised in an entrepreneurial household. Even convincing my family that I wanted to start a business was like, wait, you want to do what? You want to be professionally unemployed? It's like, no, I want to follow my passion. I want to be my own boss because I can't work for anybody, because I don't think anybody will put up with me anyway.
Yes, you are. And fourth grade, wow, like kudos and hats off to you. You have the mindset of an entrepreneur at a very young age. And what I even find interesting is that you're like, okay, yeah, give me $0.25. You're not giving your goods for free. You're not letting anybody pick your brain because a big part of entrepreneurship is actually making the revenue, right? And you had that idea at a very young age. So that was great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure.
When you got to Cornell, right? What was that like? I mean, you already knew at a young age that you wanted to work with your hands, you wanted to work with computers. But just the social aspect.
It's funny because, well, even say the 4 years, because technically I was actually in Ithaca, New York for 6 years. And
Right.
that's part of the story of what happened, because my maturation as an entrepreneur, I think when I look back, one of the things that I think makes me very good as an entrepreneur is because I know how to hustle and do the work, but I also understand that it requires an emotional quotient, or the ability to kind of work with other people and relate with other people. The people that are kind of like heads down and driven, it's great. But if you don't understand how to sell your product, if you don't understand how to learn and read people, you're not going to be a very successful entrepreneur. You need to go find somebody to do that. And I feel like my college maturation process, I actually did something called the 3-2 program, where I was at Ithaca College for 3 years, or I was at Ithaca College for 2 years, Cornell for 2 years, also a year where I split between the two campuses. So in 5 years, I got a BA in physics from Ithaca College and a BS in electrical engineering from Cornell. But I needed those years in undergrad across the 5 years to find my passion, to kind of learn, to kind of get a little bit of that writing or that liberal arts aspect out of my system. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but that wasn't the path I needed. But I also started making lifelong friends, the people that would be the best men and the groomsmen in my wedding, the people that would like point me in the right direction. And I started learning from those right people, right? Sometimes I always talk about, there's a lot of this idea about like, yeah, you don't need to go to college because like you can just get that stuff in YouTube, and, like you can just watch class online. It's like,
Mm,
that's not what college is about. It's part of it. And
right.
there are great classes that you can take. Great, you can take accounting. It's not about that. It's about the people that inspire you. And sometimes the people that inspire you are on the stage, and sometimes they're sitting in the seat to the right of you or the seat to the left of you. And the things that you do outside of that classroom, whether it's work, whether it's extracurriculars, whether it's collaborations, those sorts of things, the nuggets of what I was doing back in those years between 1989 and 1995, which were my years in Ithaca, are still things that to this day still affect how I operate, how I deal with other people, how I talk to other people. I spent this week at an event, and like that willingness to get out of my shell with all these other sports executives, because I work in the sports seat, I realized those are skills that I learned in college and honed in college. And that's what makes me a successful entrepreneur, just as much as my ability to write a bunch of code to make a blockchain go or to make a website come alive.
Yeah, you touched on something really important. It's about building those relationships, and because we don't know what those relationships will become. Like you said, lifelong friends, or it could even be a business partner or somebody that does something that you can't do in your business.
Right.
Can you take us back to a specific, story, or a memorable, rewarding story where, you kind of got out of your shell, that kind of gives that example of how you need to get out and make relationships and, work on that social skill part?
When I was at Ithaca College, I think the idea of, I'll call it student government, or basically like, being the president of the dorm or things like that, was something that never occurred to me or never appealed to me. I'm not sure which it was, but I remember at some point in time, there was a little bit of a leadership vacuum in the parts in the dorms, and it was the residential student government. I think it was RSG or something like that. And somebody was just kind of like, I think you should run. I think you should kind of go for this. And it's like, I'm never that guy. No one ever picked me to be that guy. And I don't want to be the guy, because that means I have to stand up in front of people and talk to people. And that means I have to represent stuff and listen to stuff. And I don't want to do that. I just want to do my work and maybe drink some beer and go to the bar or something like that. Right. That I was
Right.
that guy in college. I saw, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But the idea of going out and kind of putting my neck on the line to do it, and then that collaboration, but it was almost, and this is it sounds slightly egotistical and isn't intended to be, and this is kind of the part of the leadership aspect that's out there, but the fact that people were coming to me, the fact that people are listening to me, whether it was in sort of the government aspect of it or even talking to the residents, when I think about what that was like, it's like, oh my God, I have a voice. I can command a presence. I can say stuff, and people are like locked in on me. And sometimes you need to go through that experience, because now as an entrepreneur, I get on a call and it's like, it's an all hands and it's 10 people from my company. They're all staring right at my screen, at my box on the Zoom, or they're staring at me when I'm at the head of the table when we're physically together. And they're kind of hanging on my every word. It's like, what do we do? Right. And
Yeah.
until you know how to command authority in that situation, that's what entrepreneurs do. They need to evoke leadership. They need to, it's management and leadership. Make sure people are doing the right things, make sure people are doing things right. And the onus falls on the entrepreneur to make sure these things are going on. And that starts with being in a dinky little residential sort of student government and representing people and their behalfs and basically saying, okay, this is what I think we need to do. And then make your statement and make your argument with purpose with a bunch of people who you're trying to buy into their influence to say, hey, let's go do this. And for me, that felt very awkward. What is it now? 30 years ago. God, that's embarrassing. 30 years ago. And now today it feels natural. It feels literally at the core of everything. When I wake up in the morning, that's the first thing I'm thinking about is how do I get everybody in the right direction? But it doesn't happen until you kind of break the seal on people believing in you and listening to you.
Thank you for that insight into Cornell and what you did during those 6 years. Can you talk about your first business, some of the failures, what you thought it was going to become, what the goal was, and how that didn't happen how you wanted, but it's all good because you got some information to do it better on the next one. But can you kind of go into some of those quote unquote failures of a business?
It was literally 2 weeks after graduation when I started my first day on the job at Lockheed Martin. I woke up in the morning. It's true story. Is June 19th, 1995. Woke up in the morning, walked over. I was staying at home because my workplace was really close to my home. So I was in my childhood home. But as I walked over to take a shower, I'm like, is this the rest of my life? Am I going to do this every day, day in and day out for the next 35 years? And I just got a pit in my stomach. And I'm like, no. I'm made for more than this. I want to do more than this. I don't want to just be this cog in a corporate engine, just kind of working my way up. And I'm like, I got to start something. Like literally that day, I hadn't even gotten to work. And I'm like, I can't do this. Right. Well, as the story goes, about 6 months later, I leave Lockheed Martin to go west to California to work for Intel. Probably the greatest career move anybody in the world can make is going from the defense industry in 1995 to the internet industry in 1995. So I made that switch. But after about 3 years, I learned a ton at Intel, but it was the dot-com era. And for those of you who weren't alive for the dot-com era, you got to understand it was a crazy time. It was a wild time, right? And everybody was starting companies. And here I am in Northern California, and I'm seeing people younger than me or my age, and they're, dot-com millionaires. And I'm like, I got to get in on this, right? I got to find something. And so I just scrambled. And I was constantly just playing with stuff. And I found an idea that I thought was the right idea. I'm like, this is it. I'm doing it. And I'm going to find some people, you. We're going to start this business. We're going to do it. And it started little as a side gig. And literally within like a month, I'm like, I'm quitting Intel and I'm starting this company. And it's going to be multimedia. And it's going to be using compact discs along with data from the internet and synchronizing them to create this cool sort of music video experience. And it's going to be awesome. And I'm going to be one of those dot-com millionaires. And how you like me now? Great, right?
Yep.
And then it just basically kind of evolved down. And at the heart of it, before I even talk about any of the specific failures, what I'll say is that I was more excited about calling myself an entrepreneur than being an entrepreneur. I was more excited about the thrill of like, I'm starting my own business. Who are you? Right. And like, yeah, And so that's not the reason you start a business. You don't start a business because you want to be an entrepreneur. You start a business because you believe passionately in what it is that you're working on, especially because being an entrepreneur is such a roller coaster and the lows can get so incredibly low and the highs can get high, but I didn't feel that. I wasn't that passionate. I just liked the idea of calling myself an entrepreneur. If I lived in Hollywood, I would have called myself a producer. It's just things you do when you're in certain areas. And I never thought about the business model. How is this thing going to make money? I was too busy thinking this is kind of cool, right? And I'd show my friends, I'd drop in a Foo Fighters CD, and all of a sudden, the color and the shape, I still remember it. And all of a sudden magic would happen on the screen. It's like, that's great. Who's going to pay for this? I never thought about that. It's like, how do you not think about that? It's like, don't you want to get paid? Don't you want money? Well, I just thought an investor was going to come in and give me $1 million. And it's like, yeah, he might. He'll give it to the company. He won't give it to you. The only way you get your money back is if someone buys it, and only someone's going to buy it if there's commercial viability. And I've learned this, and I've seen so many people go down for this. When you get too hung up on the technology, the business will die, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference between being an innovator and being an entrepreneur. An innovator comes up with a new idea. An entrepreneur figures out how to capitalize it. And to what you said earlier, it's like when I was 8, I'd solved this, right? I was making my quarters.
Yes.
And all of
Oh,
a
yeah.
sudden I get to 24 or 25 or however I was 27 at the time I started this, just about turned 27. I forgot that lesson. I was too busy looking at the cool to realize, hey, I got to get some quarters out of this business or it's not going to happen. So I had a finite business, a business that had a shelf life, that couldn't make any money, with co-founders that had no idea what they were doing. And so I was like destined for failure. And the thing is that when I failed, or when I was ready to finally call it quits, I also happened to get into business school. And I always say my first year of business school, you could probably see like fingerprints, like, or finger sort of slaps on my head from all the times, like, oh, that's what I did wrong. Oh, that's what I did wrong throughout that entire year. There was a perfect time to go to school because having the failure allowed context for me to then examine it. It's almost like I imagine for football players when they look at the film on a Monday morning after the Sunday game, and the coach is screaming at him, look at how you missed that tackle. Look at what you did there. And it's like, oh God, was that me? Did I do that? And of course, I still made some of those mistakes again, but not as badly, and certainly a lot fewer of them with each other time that I tried.
Well, the key there is actually looking at what you could have done better, and that's how you learn. And like you said, you have to fall on these, failures or hard times to learn from them. So we have a student who's a senior with a startup. They say it's going well, but they're not sure it's going to make enough money to allow them to graduate and work on it full time. Is there any advice about that?
If there's a way you can make it work, it's definitely worth doing, because the best time to fail is now.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't do it because it just, the ends just can't meet, and you're from a family where you can't absorb that, and you can't find ways to cut corners, living at home, if you have someone who's willing to let you live at home, aka mom and dad, or you have other ways, taking roommates, doing things that cut down and let you kind of experience that, then I hate giving this advice, because I always tell people, like, side gigs are side gigs, but to a certain degree, it's hard to really be an entrepreneur unless you're really focused on, unless you're consumed by it. But that is kind of the, when all else things, I always joke, like, when you run out of bullets, throw the gun. That's the run out of bullet, throw the gun. It's like, continue to cultivate it, continue to do things that you can do, because there may be an opportunity to grow it into a business that actually is sustainable and can actually help you afford it. And in the meantime, you're kind of taking the full-time job. It's even Uber, if I remember the story correctly, because it's Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp, and I believe it was side gigs for both of them at the very beginning. It was just a cute idea to have a black car service, and then it turned out to be this, crazy company in all different ways.
I like that advice of, still keep it going, still keep it alive, but, use kind of like your common sense, with whatever your situation is, to still use that money to fund, but don't lose the passion. So I think that was a really, really, really great answer and advice. What industries are hot and happening for startups right now?
The advice that I give everybody that's in their early 20s and trying to figure stuff out is, I'm like, look for 3 things, right? One is find a domain that you're really excited about and you care about, right? And for me, through most of my career, like sports and tech, or in some cases sports tech, has been where most of my attention's been, because I do that stuff on the weekends. I do that stuff on vacation if my wife would let me. Like, it's just, that's the stuff I care about.
right?
Find a situation where you have as much autonomy as is humanly possible. In most cases, the best way to do that is start your own company. You're your own boss. No one can tell you what to do except for customers, but you're in service to them. There are still jobs at companies, but you want to find one where you have a boss that gives you the latitude to create, to learn, to grow, to make some mistakes in that sort of environment and be okay with that. And then the third piece is that surround yourself with people you love, trust, respect. So it's really about like, what problem can you attack that you can get passionate about? And then within that, what tools are you specifically well suited to be able to apply to those problems, so that someone trusts you either to give you a job in that space or to give you money to go start a business.
We talked a little bit about it off record. Just the problem that you solved with Live Nation, and being able to, now that the company can actually track where tickets are, who's buying the tickets, because they didn't know that. So, can you talk a little bit about the problem that you solved for them?
My previous company was a company called In Stadium, where I was CTO. And we were talking to a customer who was an assistant athletic director at a Pac-12 school. And we were showing him our product, and he basically said, "When are you getting a ticketing?" We're like, "Well, we haven't done it yet, but we're going to do it soon." He's like, "When?" And when your customer asks twice, you shut up and you're like, "Okay, customer, tell me, because you seem to have a bone to pick, and in this case with ticketing." And he basically explained, kind of to what you said, Lindsay, is that it's like, okay, I give a ticket up, I don't know what happened. So I might even know who bought the ticket, but I don't
Hmm.
actually know who went to the game, because the person might have bought a ticket and bought it as a gift and given it to somebody else straight up, or bought a ticket and brought his wife or his drinking buddy or something like that. Don't know that, or might have put it on Craigslist or StubHub or eBay, and then what happens to the ticket? Or he might have printed out 10 copies, sold them on Craigslist, first person gets in, the other 9 people, it comes out to be a fake ticket. And so the idea of having a digital asset where one person could own it, could transfer it to another person, you could track that ownership of the ticket as it goes through the cycle. You could also find out that, like, once that person transfers it, the originator doesn't have that ticket, which is the problem with what they used to call photocopy fraud. You make 10 copies and you sell them. It's like, no, there's no such thing as 10 copies. Like, how do you do that? And for me, that was the blockchain, which in 2015, now a lot of people know about the blockchain, but in 2015, the blockchain was still a relatively new technology. And so the idea of taking that blockchain technology, applying it to tickets, was at the core of what we did in late 2015. And we had done something called colored coins. It was actually using the Bitcoin blockchain and doing a little bit of voodoo to make it work so that it could represent a ticket. About 3 to 5 months after I started the company, Ethereum hit the Homestead release, which was like the one that it's like, all right, now we think it's a good idea for you to build on it. And I started playing around with it. And as I like to tell people, I spent 72 hours. I'm like, I'm going to learn everything there is to know about Ethereum. And at the end of 72 hours, I knew 2 things. One was, this was the most interesting thing to happen to computer science in the previous 10 years, going back to the iPhone. And 2, I was going to throw away all my company's code and rewrite everything for Ethereum. Because Ethereum, I always kind of like telling people, for those of you who aren't versed in the blockchain, there's the Bitcoin blockchain and the Ethereum blockchain. And the Bitcoin blockchain is like cash, and the Ethereum blockchain is like a credit card. And why that's important. I mean, cash is great. Like, if one of you wants to send me a $20 bill, I'm cool with it. But a credit card's much better, because it could be $20 or $200. It could be a deposit. It could be an identifier. It can be a loyalty program. I have an Amazon Prime credit card, so that Amazon can learn even more about me. And by the way, there's my echo right there. They're listening to this whole conversation. But the idea of being able to capture all this data, have a lot of flexibility, that's what Ethereum did. That's what smart contracts did. And that was the opportunity to say, wait a minute, I was already solving one problem, which is around tickets, but what about all the other things? What about loyalty? What about these other pieces that are out there? And that's where Upgraded, which is the company that I'd started. In fact, it was originally called BlockTix because it was blockchain ticketing. And the blockchain scared so many people in 2016 that I had to change the name of the company to Upgraded. But that's where Upgraded really found its mojo, that it's like, all right, we're going to take these tickets, we're going to turn them into smart contracts, And that was at the premise, that was at the core of the premise of what we were trying to do. And then basically by 2017, we realized the opportunity to be part of that in the resale market, to track where tickets go after they get sold by brokers and other parties that are trying to sell tickets. By 2018, we realized theater tickets really stunk and their systems were way behind, and this was a way to leapfrog. So it was a constant evolution between what the original idea and what the original problem we were trying to solve in 2015, which we had a good feeling for because we knew some of the customers, because we could interview them and really get it right. By 2018, where our tickets were these crazy sort of smart contracts. And that's when Ticketmaster came along and said, we like those crazy smart contracts. We like the way you think. Come on over here and bring your technology into what we're doing at Ticketmaster. And that's where we were ultimately acquired in September of 2018.
I love it. I love it. Thanks so much for that. The little bit of snippet of back. I think we've all kind of evolved in what the blockchain and what Ticketmaster and Live Nation does now, but I wanted to give you the floor to give a little history on that, because you are the originator with Upgraded behind that. So I love it. And let's kind of go into what you're doing now. We've talked a little bit about blockchain, you're a Web3 guy, but let's mention your new stuff, what you're doing full time now with Credenza.
Sure. Yeah. So basically, when I left Ticketmaster in late 2020, I had actually told myself no more blockchain. I was done with the blockchain because everybody called me the blockchain guy, Mr. Blockchain. My fantasy football was called the Blockchainers. I'd kind of over-indexed on blockchain. And I'm like, I'm about more than blockchain. I could do more. And so suddenly I was talking to NBA teams. I was talking to leagues. I was talking to like Hall of Fame athletes who were all introduced to me just like, oh, this is Sandy, he gets blockchain. And at the end of it, they always same things like, this is great. I get it now. This is awesome. I love what you're saying. So what should I do? And for an entrepreneur, when someone sits there and is almost like shaking the money at you and saying, shut up and take my money, and you're an entrepreneur, you don't have a business, it's like getting caught, with your pants at your ankles, like, oh my God, this is embarrassing. Like, oh, like I got to have something. I was back in the blockchain. I'm like, I'm doing it. I was just basically meeting with anybody who would talk to me. And the good news is that everybody wanted to talk to me because they're like, explain the blockchain to me. So I would take about 45 minutes, explain the blockchain to them. And I would take the last 20 minutes and I'd say, tell me about your business. What keeps you up at night? What are you worried about? What are you trying to achieve? And they're like, well, we like NFTs. So I'm like, no. Don't talk to me about NFTs.
Right.
Talk to me about your business. You're a Major League Baseball team. You're an NFL team. And by the way, every league's got different issues, right? The MLS and the NFL are both professional sports franchises, but they also have very different concerns about, like, the NFL is not worried about where the next dollar is going to come from. MLS needs to worry about survival, especially back in 2021. And I started to kind of build a prioritized list of like, okay, what are the things that we can address? And what are the things that blockchain potentially could help here, so that it's like, come for the NFTs and stay for the fact that we're going to change your business. And so we built a business called Credenza. And the idea behind Credenza is to say, let's forget about collectibles for a second. Let's talk about ticketing, sponsorship, concession, merchandise, content rights. How do we bring those things to Web3? How do we let people upgrade their core situations from Web 1 and Web 2 approaches to Web3 by taking advantage of decentralization, by taking advantage of the nature of the transactions on the blockchain, all these other pieces. So for me, it was like, how do I take what I know about the blockchain? How do I take these skills I have and the fact that I do believe Web3 can be across all these different components? And how do I bring them together? And if it is all on the blockchain, the ability to create a singularity between the way you approach ticketing and the way you approach sponsorships and the way you approach merchandise, especially if you can consolidate the view of the customer, that changes everything.
Yeah, and it changes the way we look at and experience these experiences, right?
That's right.
And that's really what it's all about. And it has taken your innovation and dedication, and the skill that you've had since you were 8 or 9, probably
That's right.
before that, when you started putting it to use, for this all to come about. We have a few more minutes. I wanted to ask you just like one lasting question. you've had a plethora of businesses and experiences, and what has been the most important thing to you when it comes to like integrity of a business, and being able to be sustainable and also like integral, with
Yeah.
everything, making money, making lots of it. And then also, falling off a little bit,
Mhm.
entrepreneurship has that up and down. So you have to keep your mindset and your mental health in check. But sometimes when you reach a low point, sometimes that integrity can kind of be like,
Yeah.
how did you deal with that throughout all these years?
I was at an event this week and someone's like, Credenza, oh, I've heard of you. And I didn't get nervous. I mean, I always joke, I'm like, all good, I hope. But in reality, I know it's going to be all good because I've treated everybody fairly. I will
Mm,
take a hit on money any day for the sake of maintaining credibility and maintaining trust. Because not only is it right for the business, but it's right for me personally. And every one of us has our own personal brand. Every one of us is going to come with reputation. One of the things that I know, like, I will never be Sean likes, I think I once said to Sean, there's no such thing as an unemployed entrepreneur. So I was about to say, like, I'll never be unemployed. And I'm like, of course I'm not, because I'm an entrepreneur. But I also know that because of everybody that I've ever worked for in the past will either give me a job or give me the highest recommendation because I've always operated with integrity. I'd like to think I'm a smart guy, but it's also that I've always done right by everybody I've worked with and everybody I've worked for. And, and again, going back even to the sort of the mental health aspect, it's like if you're operating with integrity, if you're operating your company with your integrity yourself, it makes the harder times a little easier because it's like, no, 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 I'm fighting for something. I believe in what I'm doing. This is who I am. And what I am is my wife and my two kids. What I am is the legacy of my mother and my father who've since passed away. What I am is a Cornell alum, and everything I do reflects on Cornell. What I am is a friend to a lot of people that care a lot about me. And everything I do, whether it's in work, whether it's in play, whether it's as a father, whether it's in all these situations, those actions reflect what I am.
thank you so much for that. So I
My
hope
pleasure.
everyone enjoyed and, got all the valuable information that Sandy shared, and have a good night, everyone. Join us next time on another episode of Start Now. To see more episodes, visit newhouse.syr.edu/startnow.